important element of progress.
Acting in secret and without proper accountability, and because they always get things wrong, we can reliably expect that there are going to be more scandals come out of this.
Nicky Hager, thank you for taking part in the launch of Evening Report, and also congratulations at the front end for this investigation that is obviously ongoing at the moment. Now, Nicky, the State Services Commission review recently stated here, suspicions and mistrust have more room to flourish in the absence of information, end of quote. Now that this kind of information is in the public arena, is the public's mistrust and suspicions warranted, do you believe?
Oh, I think so. What happens with spy agencies is that there's a great arrogance around them. They use their secrecy, which they need for their work, to be a secrecy which means that they don't have to be accountable. That when people come up with allegations or want to know what they're doing, they can say they're far too secret and nobody needs to know, which is actually not true. That while some of what they do has to be secret, mostly it's just very convenient for these retiring kind of, living in the shadows organizations to just have a get out of jail free card on everything. And so they can always deny and they can always say that its security stops them having to comment. And that's not good enough in a democracy.
How do you think this affects the New Zealand democracy when the state is operating almost as an entity that has no consequence from oversight? It almost is an entity to its own.
I think, to me, it has two consequences. One is that we don't have a serious debate about our foreign policy as it's affected by intelligence, which to me is very important. But that's only half the picture, because the other thing that happens is that if they won't engage factually, it means that there's a whole lot of wild fears and beliefs around what they do, which actually, at least internally within New Zealand, I suspect are more damaging than the truth. And what I'm talking about here is that I am continuously approached by people who believe or are worried that there's a van outside their house with GCSB written on the inside that is bugging their lives, is intruding on them. Now, this is a huge cost on a society. If your spy agencies play their secret games and won't deny, won't confirm anything, get caught out doing illegal spying and still keep the barriers up, well, then they have to expect this to happen, and they're not doing their share of fixing it, which is that people have real but actually unnecessary fears about them. So I've got a divided view of the intelligence agencies. On the one hand, I think we fear them more than we need to, and there's widespread fear that there doesn't have to be. On the other hand, on the things where they're really doing things wrong, and in their shadowy world, they get away with a lot of things which are wrong and out of sync with our country. On those real things, they don't get accountability either.
So if we're looking at those specifics there, for example, that this is obviously like a dragnet type operation that you and David Fisher and others have brought to the public, the full tape collection being the key words here, obviously. So that means everybody in the Pacific, that goes down to some small, even a teenager using a cell phone, is being captured, and is that data, that communication being stored somewhere so that even when that person perhaps is 10 years older, it could be retrieved and even potentially used against them?
Okay. It's important that I explain what we know and what we're not sure of here. So what we know as an absolute fact now, without a doubt, is that the GCSB, its Waihopai station, like its overseas allies, have moved to this full tape collection. And what that means is that, yes, right down to the person who uses Gmail on a little island in Tuvalu, or the person who's calling their auntie in New Zealand from Samoa or whatever it is, this stuff is being captured. And it's on a huge scale. That's all true. It doesn't mean that all of those people are being actively watched, because most of them aren't being, which is where we don't want to spread unnecessary fear. But their communications have been caught. What we don't know, because there is just no source on this, is how long they keep it all at the moment. It used to be that Waihopai that it would be They would search for what was going on, and it would just disappear into the ether the next second. What seems to be going on now, what my best guess would be, is that they have got all these National Security Agency programs which are processing like a great big sort of food production company with everyone's messages and emails and things from around the Pacific. They're processing that into different formats. One is that they're putting them into databases of phone calls and literal emails and text messages, which are available for some length of time for analysts to look through. We don't know that length of time, and that's the bit where I'm personally uncertain. It won't be forever because the bulk of this stuff will just be beyond us, I think, at least on current storage capability. But the other thing that they are doing is that they're saving what's called the metadata. Metadata is this word that came into the language pretty much with Edward Snowden as a general language. And that means that the thing which often most valuable to an intelligence agency is not being able to listen to every phone call, which would take them 1,000 lifetimes, because you can't do that. It's that they store up the who called who, what time they did it, what was the nearest cell phone tower, and when you build up year after year of everyone's calls and everyone's connections, that's extremely valuable if you're trying to connect up people or track down people or find out who people's friends are in their crazy world of thinking that they need to spy on everybody. Now that metadata, my strong presumption is that if it's not already, it will pretty soon be saved permanently. That's not a low enough data sizes that side of it we can expect will be permanently recorded for the young boy or girl going onto Gmail, or the person contacting their auntie in New Zealand or whatever.
Okay, now I also understand that there's been significant and ongoing significant development in the infrastructure in the United States, particularly on the western side, to contain and become storage silos for such information.
That's right. So what we know is that whether you're talking about the Waihopai base in New Zealand, the documents we had talked about how they were building up their capacity ready for full take collection, so that they actually had enough computer storage for all the new data that they would be bringing in there, the huge increase in data. And then you've got the other extreme, which is in the desert in the United States, where they're building these massive warehouses which are just going to try and store the world's communications. Everything forever, we don't know that, because these are very secret activities. But what we do know for certain is that these agencies, with their obsessive desire to have everything everywhere and for as long as they can, are holding as much of this data for as long as they can everywhere.
And of course, what we're talking about here is the full take collection of communications within the realm of New Zealand states. Awful name that, isn't it? But including Tokelau, Niue, Cook Islands, significantly too Fiji, Samoa, Tonga. Now, I would imagine that the sensitivities inside Tonga in particular will be heightened when you consider that Akalisi Pohiva is the new Prime Minister over in Tonga, who has had a lifetime of activism, a lifetime of political representation from the grassroots coming through. The pro-democracy movement has been in the past hammered in Tonga by the nobility and the clash within that community. Now, this kind of revelation where the big powers of the Pacific and certainly the United States leading the charge, what kind of effect do you think that's going to have on the way Tonga interacts with New Zealand?
This is a very interesting question. Can I correct something first? Because we want to be as accurate as, it's important that we are as accurate as we can be when we're given fog and mist and fen when we're trying to,
Absolutely.
engage with the agencies. So just to be clear, from what we managed to find out, Tokelau is not on the target list, and Cook Islands and Niue are all New Zealand citizens. So the citizens aren't being spied on, but the government is. So those are the only exceptions, and every other country like Tonga is being comprehensively spied on all the time. Okay, so just to be factual. So what do I think about Tonga, for example? If I was a leader in Tonga, I would be incensed, because Tonga doesn't spy on New Zealand. Tonga doesn't spy on the United States. New Zealand has no special reason. There have been a few people in New Zealand commenting, of course we would spy on the South Pacific, we need to know what's going on, which is an incredibly patronizing, colonial kind of view of the world, that somehow you can't have diplomats sit around a drink or a coffee with people in these countries and talk to them and treat them as human beings who you can actually understand, as opposed to having to read their private emails in the Prime Minister's department or something. This is an unnecessary way to do things. And so if I was the leader of Tonga, I would be really mad at New Zealand. And I would be mad, first of all, because we do it, but secondly, because of why we do it. Because I do not believe that the New Zealand intelligence agencies are collecting information on Tonga because there is a burning foreign policy desire to have strong information and do the right things on Tonga. The reason that we spy on Tonga is the same reason we spy on Tuvalu and the same reason we spy on Vanuatu, and that is simply that we have got what's called an area of responsibility in the Five Eyes Alliance. They are just tokens of our allegiance to a US intelligence alliance. In other words, the reason we spy on those countries, literally, I'm really sure I'm right on this, the primary reason we do it is so that we can have an offering, a useful offering at the table when we're one of the Five Eyes intelligence partners. So it's even more insulting than if we were spying on the Tongans and others because we wanted to know their secrets. That's not even the reason we're doing it. We're just doing it to buy our way into closer relations with the United States Intelligence Alliance. It's a really scummy reason when you think about these are our neighbours who we're selling out for that.
And if we look to that French Polynesia, New Caledonia comes into this scope of the New Zealand GCSB surveillance here, and that takes another more sinister overtone when you consider that nation, France, that controls that territory, is a nuclear power. Do you think that has a consequence on the way New Zealand can be treated perhaps by France when it realises that, okay, now New Zealand, it's official really in the sense that the official documents are suggesting, is actually the primary collector of all communications on its territory in the Pacific?
I think it's a little bit different for France. For these smaller countries, I won't call them naive, but they are not in the swim of big time espionage and high level politics. These are small countries. These are like, some of them are the size of a small town in New Zealand, literally. And so they can't be expected to have the infrastructure to protect themselves, to have high-level codes, to be involved in world espionage or something. When you get to France, France does this stuff themselves. They know it goes on, and so they're going to have a completely different attitude, actually. And it won't become as even the slightest surprise to them to know that New Zealand has been spying on their territories for years. So I think in terms of diplomatic and emotional impact, it will be different there. It's those small countries. It's the ones where we don't have a good excuse and we are just selling them out, where I think it's particularly bad.
Where the bully factor kicks in. I mean, if we were looking...
Where the arrogant don't care about them. We claim to care, profess to be great buddies, and actually just be prepared to sell them down the river because we can get some benefit in Washington.
I've noticed some of your critics on social media this week, as the information has been revealed to the public, have criticised in this way. They're saying, well, so what? That of course New Zealand does this, it's a part of the Five Eyes. And of course on the other side they're saying China will be doing it, so what does it matter? How do you respond to that?
I think this is a kind of a world-weary, cynical kind of know-it-all view, actually. Because the world doesn't know that New Zealand spies on all those specific countries, especially not in the way that we do. And the idea that it's natural for a little country of 4 million people, which claims to have these special relationships country by country around the Pacific and to be their friend, to be intensively spying on them against their interests, this is not known. I'm afraid that's what you get with a certain kind of journalist and commentator, is that they will say something's wrong, they'll believe it's wrong, they'd just as happily have said that I'd got the whole story wrong, and then when it's proven right, they say, everyone knew this, so what? I don't think those people are kind of our moral and political thinkers and leaders, and we shouldn't take their views too seriously.
Okay, if we're looking at New Zealand hoovering up all of this information on its so-called colonial patch here in the South Pacific, Southwest Pacific, who's doing it to New Zealand? If the GCSB is not doing it to New Zealand itself, which one of the Five Eyes partners is doing it to us?
Well, we don't know what we don't know. I think it's an open question whether the United States National Security Agency quietly spies on its allies like New Zealand. Because one of the things that is absolutely clear from the Snowden Revelations is that other US intelligence allies, like France, Germany, and the rest of Europe, who thought they were the closest buddies and were immune from US spying, were being spied on just the same as any other country. So maybe New Zealand is getting that, but we don't know that. But I actually think this is a very important question in terms of New Zealanders' feelings on these things. Is every New Zealander being spied on from somewhere? Well, according to the documents I've seen, no, they're not. The debate in New Zealand about the GCSB has acted as if the GCSB is there to spy on New Zealanders. It's not. It's a foreign intelligence organisation. That's what it was set up to do. Spying on New Zealanders is not part of its routine remit. And there have been exceptions because they've been operating in the shadows, and so they've stretched the rules, and they've done other things like the illegal spying on 88 people over the last 10 years that came up. But 88 people over 10 years is not a very large number. It's not their primary work. And so one of the things I wanted to emphasize when we actually had the Snowden documents and we could tell the proper story, like as far as those documents would allow us, was, hey everyone, let's focus on the issue which is most important about this, which is not the privacy of somebody living in Wellington or Auckland, it's the privacy of someone living in Honiara or Suva. That and many other countries which are yet to be revealed actually, because we've got many more stories to come. Now I think that's probably the first important lesson about this. On the other hand, mass surveillance systems are a problem, and if you have a mass surveillance system for a start, which is spying on the whole of the South Pacific, heaps of New Zealanders have their families there, they were born there, they come and go from there, they might be living there at the moment, they go on holiday there, they're doing business there, and all of their communications have been caught as well, and which is why I actually hadn't thought this through when I was writing the stories, but I'm very pleased that there's been a complaint has gone into the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security to say, wait a moment, is this actually lawful for every New Zealander who one way or another is living in the Pacific or interacting with the Pacific to have their communications intercepted, which is what a mass surveillance full tank collection means. That's great, that's very important. And within New Zealand, there's another level of it, which is that the GCSB can be used, and the laws were actually strengthened on this by the police, by the Defence Force, by the SIS to target people in New Zealand. And because they're acting in secret and without proper accountability, and because they always get things wrong, we can reliably expect that there are going to be more scandals come out on this, that there will be more things that they've done wrong. And while I don't think they're doing mass surveillance, I'm certain the GCSB is not doing mass surveillance every day of every New Zealander and getting metadata on every New Zealander. They are doing operations against particular New Zealanders, and some of them are going to blow up in their faces because they will have done stupid things again.
Now, the presumption would be that New Zealand doesn't have the capability to develop the technology that's necessary to do this type of operation. So what do we know about that technology that is, and where it's based in New Zealand, and who provides it? My presumption clearly is that it's United States-led Five Eyes type of equipment.
Yeah, the idea that New Zealand can't do it ourselves is fairly accurate, but it's irrelevant because the GCSB is not a New Zealand operation in any practical sense. Our latest story on the Waihopai facility, which is New Zealand's main Five Eyes contribution, is that when you go inside it, which we could only do with the Snowden documents, not physically, every single piece of the equipment there, every program on the computers, every database, every search tool, every intelligence processing tool is an NSA tool or a British GCHQ, that's their equivalent of the GCSB and NSA. Every single thing there is British or American technology, which is the same in every other base like this around the world. So it's nominally a New Zealand base, but actually the only sense in which it's even vaguely a New Zealand base is that there are New Zealanders who go in there and do the work of managing and tending the foreign equipment. And apart from that, as the stories have been showing, it's barely a New Zealand operation. When they do the spying on the whole of the South Pacific and suck in all its material and then save it as metadata or in other ways, if a New Zealand intelligence officer wants to look at that, it's not New Zealand data. What they do is they go into an NSA database to look for it. That's how integrated it is. It's not even that the Americans can look at the New Zealand intelligence. It becomes American intelligence within their system, and if New Zealanders want to see it, we have to go to it through a US interface and look at it on a US database. That's how integrated we are.
Now, the Prime Minister says, and his criticisms of yourself and others involved in this investigation, is that Some of the information is old. The presumptions that are being made, or the word presumption is what he's referring to, are inaccurate. That basically there's nothing to see here. Is in your book Secret Power, the foreword written by David Longy, and I think it surprised many who would read that book to realise that the Prime Minister at the time when the GCSB was established here knew very little of what its intention was and what it went about doing. Do you think that the people, our representatives, those that are in the beehive governing the affairs of New Zealand and in an executive government, are aware of this type of information, aware of what is going on, or are they looking the other way and saying, I don't want to know, or are they blindly lying?
My own view is, of course, I don't know for sure. This is what I believe from having worked on this hard and working on the subject, of course, for many years since I wrote that, when I was writing that first book. I feel fairly confident that John Key won't know most of the stuff that we reveal. The details that we've just come out with about what's going on inside the Waihopai station, he won't know that. He won't know that, but more to the point, he's not interested. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about foreign policy very much. He's never taken interest in it. It's not a part of his life. He likes to meet important people overseas, but he's not actually interested in foreign policy or defence policy or intelligence policy. So I see no reason why he would have taken any close look at any of this. And so he's actually, when I was writing that book, he's more or less in the tradition of a line of National Party leaders who have traditionally been in charge of the intelligence services, which is that they don't look because they don't really care, and the ships pretty much run themselves. So that's the main thing I would say about John Key's involvement. But in terms of his immediate reaction, which was before the material we even began to be published, he said it was wrong, he knew it would be wrong, it was wrong like my last book, and that kind of statement. He's just making that up. And what he's doing is to move into political analysis. He's trying to talk to people who've got a tribal view of politics and say to them, don't look at this. In fact, he even made the astonishing statement, which is quite spooky in a supposedly democratic country, where he said, I strongly advise New Zealanders not to even read these stories when they come out. Now, what kind of a weirdo is that? What kind of strange idea is it that you want the public not even to hear a different point of view? So I don't think this is about his knowledge or even about secrecy of intelligence. I think it's a peculiar style of political management where he is inviting as large a section of the public as possible to not engage and not to think and not to listen to a point of view which he's saying that they shouldn't listen to. Of course, for me, it's been very satisfying because he said that, and he said in advance that it was going to be wrong. When it came out, he said it was wrong. And then since then, the former head of the GCSB, who knows much more about this than he has been on the radio saying that, in fact, the whole story is right.
And clearly there's a lot of information that is going to be revealed over time. One of the things that seems to remain unanswered at this juncture is the idea that was put out there, or the statement that was put out there by Edward Snowden last year in the election campaign, that there was an NSA base in Auckland, and he made reference to another one as well. Now, what information do you have that would indicate that was accurate or not?
I've actually been in contact with Edward Snowden about that. I can explain now. And this is a work in progress. We're in communication about it. And what he was writing about, what he wrote about and spoke about there, has some substance to it, but he had his geography slightly wrong. Is actually the true story of this, because I've been in contact with him, which is what he said to me, but we haven't got to the bottom of what he actually does know yet. So I won't speak up on that because I'm not sure what the final answer is going to be.
Well, thanks, Nicky. Thanks very much for taking part.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.